Hi, so a quick little video about how to improve the dials in your E-Type, and I'm going to show you this one. This is one that I've already taken out. This is for the battery. If you kind of look closely at it, you can kind of see around the rim. If I kind of tilt it a bit backwards and forwards, you can kind of see it's looking a bit rough. And certainly inside the clasp piece there, what appears, I must admit, it looks a bit like mould on the inside. So I've been going through the various dials, tidying them up and refreshing them, and you'll also see the case is not looking the best it can do. Quite a lot of surface rust on them. To get these out, it's really quite simple. You can see this long piece here. There is, on the back of these, as they sit in the dashboard, so I grab this bit back here, there is like a clamp. So to take them off, it's really quite easy. This kind of clamps it onto the back of the dashboard. So all you do is unscrew the little screw that's on here, and they were just hand tight. That then releases this bracket, and you can push it out through the front. It's that simple. So not hard to get off once you've dropped it down as you would normally do to kind of access the fuse box. Where I'm going with these, and you can probably see if I move the tape measure out of the way, is I have some of the ones that I've done already. So you can see the massive difference between the two. But the interesting bit is when you get this rim off, and I'll show you that next, just to see the way it's deteriorated behind there, because that's where most of the gunk kind of sits. And I've kind of refreshed these. There's nothing wrong with the dials, they all work, they're all fine, so this is just an appearance thing. But to say, one of the dials that I had was really grubby behind the back of the glass. So that's what started me off on the path of taking them to bits and getting them cleaned up. But by the end of it, this one should look a bit more like that one. The only other one to mention is the clock. The clock's a bit of a different animal. I actually thought when I first looked at this it was welded into the dashboard, but it turns out not to be. It just takes a huge amount of force to push this forward. It's kind of got these spring clips on the side here. If I can hold that against the back wall, you might be able to see the gap. So these, and they kind of compress in. So really you have to kind of push through those to get it back out again. But once you've done that, it is relatively simple. Now, when I take these ones apart, I do take them apart. So this outer rim comes off, which then releases the glass, and also allows you to get to the fascia behind it and clean that up as well if you want. And the bit where it says battery there, that bit actually pops out as well if you really want to go that far as well. But this one, a bit more of a challenge. The way that this one is sealed around the outside meant that I couldn't actually release this off. So really all I've done is kind of cleaned this one up and repainted it after masking off the front of it. Bit of annoyance because I can see a tiny bit of rust in there, which is annoying me, but I can't get to it. I can't get to it without really messing with that, the way that this is clamped over the outside, and I didn't really want to do that for risk of damaging it. So I've sacrificed a bit of rust in order not to overdo it and end up completely killing my clock. So that's the clock one. So what I'll do is I'll start off first with how you go about taking these apart. Okay, so this is where we get to the fun bit of taking it to bits. So the first thing you'll notice is there is a piece of rubber that goes around the outside, and normally on every one that I've found so far, that's normally stuck in various places to the body or the face. So it's just usually loosening that up to release it. Now, if you can see on the video, I don't know how clear this is, what you'll notice is that around the outside dial there are various, as you look around, tabs, and roughly speaking there are 3 of them. So the challenge is just to get underneath those tabs with a very small screwdriver without managing to take your fingers off in the process, and basically work those tabs up so you can open them out. So that's one done. Apologies if this isn't hugely clear on the video. That one's actually quite tight down, so I'm going to move on to the next one. As I say, it's normally what I found is getting a small screwdriver and working it underneath. They're right underneath the black paint there. Look, what looks like brass. So it's a relatively soft metal. Right, back to my difficult one. There we go. That's it, prized open. So now what you tend to find is it's usually quite stiff, but you can already see it is lifting off, and lo and behold, the mess that sits underneath it. So it's usually, on all the ones that I've taken, it's rusted around the edges, but generally speaking the glass comes off okay. There we go. And that comes out, and you might be able to see, it's very hard underneath the camera, but there are marks and stains on the inside of that glass, which is kind of spoiling it really. So that'll clean up with a bit of polish. But the more interesting stuff is whatever was used as a seal on the inside of the ring, because that has completely perished, hardened, all the way around the inside of the ring. So you can kind of flake all of that stuff out and then clean up the ring and repaint it. It is literally gone really hard. It's like very, very brittle, whatever was used to originally seal that ring in. But as you can see from the mess that I am making, it does readily come free, and you end up with a relatively cleaned up ring just by scraping around with a screwdriver. Generally I'll take a wire brush to this afterwards and get it all out, but you can see that's whatever was, the ring already looks a lot better, that was whatever was holding the glass in place. What I have done is, when I have put these back together, if I bring in from the side here, you'll be able to see this is like a bit of self-adhesive foam. Best bit, since that's not working, sorry, apologies, not the camera then. So it's just a little bit of foam that's got a bit of self-adhesive backing. It's only, I think, probably about 5mm in widths and 3mm or so in depth. And what I've been doing is effectively using that as my replacement gasket. It takes a bit of effort to push it down afterwards, but produces a nice finish and seals the units back up afterwards. So effectively what I'm going to do is I will clean that all up, and this will be resprayed. Once again, clean all of this up. What you can do to go even further, and what I did on the other ones, is you'll see on the back here, these are actual screws for the terminals. Sometimes you can't actually get a screwdriver, if I find my screwdriver that I've cast to one side. You see in here, you can kind of see, if I hold it above the debris, you can kind of see a screwdriver, but it's usually very hard. So normally all it takes is a bit of pliers to unloosen those on both sides, and you can effectively lift this all off. Basically what there is here is this screw on top, there is a washer underneath, there is the terminal itself, then there is like a piece of Bakelite or something that sits between the body and the terminal, and finally almost like a bit of paper card that sits underneath that. So those are the bits that you lift off, and then you can clean up the rest of the body without worrying too much about those getting in the way. And then usually what I'll do, and I'll kind of show you through the stages as I go next, is effectively sand this down, prime it up, and then after a couple of coats of primer, just spray it up with some satin black paint. On the inside here, as I say, you can normally quite easily take out where it says battery if you want to. Depends on how deep clean you want. Sand down this outer edge, and once again clean it up. Oh, I've missed a step. I've missed telling you about a step. Normally what I do is put some rust converting solution on top of this, something like crust or something like that, just to convert the rust before I prime it up. But as I say, I'll show you those as the next step, but that is basically how you take it to bits. Okay, as you can see, the unit's been stripped down now, and these are the various bits and pieces that I have left from the disassembly. I've taken the actual unit itself and given it a good sand down with just some plain old wet and dry emery paper. That's got most of the rust off, but there are still obviously some bits on there which I will paint with some crust. I have taken the, I guess what you call it, the outer fascia off. This has got a bit of corrosion around the edge, which I'll try and remedy before I put back on. Touch it up with a bit of black paint around the edge to remove that. The glass itself has been taken out. Took quite a lot of scrubbing to get some of the ingrained dirt off it, but it has been polished up, and now put my fingers all over it, so I'll do it again. But basically for that, basically used a Stanley knife blade and gave that a good scratching around the glass just to remove all the bits that were well and truly embedded in it. The terminals have taken off, but that does actually loosen it up on the inside, so you can kind of see you've got some, it moves around a bit. I will clean up in here, but that's not in too bad condition. It will need some touching around the edges where it's corroded around there, some of the crust again, and then after I've done that, tape up the bulb holder, and it will go through a couple of sprays of primer and then some satin matte black on top of that. In terms of the terminals themselves, what you get is what's like a piece of paper. That's the first bit. Then you get what looks like a bit of a Bakelite bracket, which is followed by the terminal itself, which kind of sits on the top. And then on top of that there is a washer, and finally the brass screw-on nut, for want of a better word. Oh, and the other thing obviously is the bezel as well. You can see all of the gunk that was in there isn't in there anymore, so that's all been cleaned up, and that'll be sprayed as well. So that's where we are. I'll come back to you after I've finished it and it looks like the others. So we're kind of there, more or less. Just pop the glass off. You can see I've kind of repainted the unit and reassembled the connection points in the order that I kind of took it off. So you can kind of see the paper kind of washer, then the connection point, and then the screw on top. They've all been sprayed up, so they're looking in a lot better condition. And I've done a bit of touching up on the front fascia, and the glass has all been polished up as well. So the only thing that remains is to put the original ring bracket that sits on top of that over it. Now, actually within here I've already pre-cut a piece, but you remember when I took the item apart, actually in this ring bit here there was a lot of gunk, which I think is the original sealer that sat between the kind of bezel and the actual unit. and that seemed to have hardened and cracked and done all sorts of things over its lifespan. So effectively what I've got here is a bit of, I think the actual size of this is 3mm by 5mm, and all I've done is cut a length effectively to sit within the ring here, and then what I'll do is I'll take the sticky back plastic off, and as you can see, it's not perfect. It could do, I think, with being a bit smaller, but effectively once the tape's removed and that's in there, I'll then push the unit onto the bezel, and you can see around the edges here, if that's coming out clearly on the camera, is the little clips. So at various points around the bezel here there's kind of slots, and the idea is kind of push it in, turn it ever so slightly, and I'll use this to kind of push those tabs back around again, which will allow me to reassemble it all together. So that's the final finishing steps. So there we go, all completed now. I've put the original rubber ring on the back of it, so that's ready to slot back in. Hopefully you can see from that how much better it's now looking. Nice and polished, nice and shiny, and looking like new again. So I will add that to the collection with the other ones that I've refurbished, and there's one more to go for me.